This week we have a hand that has already become legendary and it's only about 2 weeks old. And a big reason is one guy makes a royal flush and there's a ton of action.
Yeah, it's the 2016 PCA and there's 31 left, and Philip McAllister is going to make a royal flush, we promise. This is actually one of the most requested hands we've ever had, even though it's only 2 weeks old.
A lot of people.
Yeah, check them out. All these people requested this hand on Twitter, and if you have a suggestion for the breakdown, you can do the same, and make sure you include a link to the YouTube video.
So what we do know is that Philip McAllister has King 10 of Hearts and Paul Tedeschi has Pocket Queens. We never find out what Fabian Raba has. That's his name, Fabian Raba. But we speculate throughout our analysis in the video, and that's really the main thing we focus on.
Yep. Now we're going to stop the hand at certain points and break down the action.
Huh. So Tedeschi's raised to 36,000 here. Philip McAllister calls out of a stack of 1.74 million.
Yeah, that's a lot of dimp.
5K. Oh, all right, my bad.
Yeah. McAllister has the table chip lead, and in this hand he'll have the advantage of position. He's on the button.
Looks like we've got a decision.
Decision is to call as well.
You're in hand, sorry.
Raba comes in from the big blind, so we're three-way to the flop.
Jaya Raba.
And that flop is Queen 8-4 with 2 clubs. Looks like Raba has checked to the razor.
Makes sense. Tedeschi was actually on that French Global Poker Masters team. So my guess is he's a pretty good poker player.
It's been checked to McAllister. And I've been impressed by what we've seen from this guy today. He's held the tournament chip lead at various points over the last 48 hours.
He's striking that
Spectacular.
pose.
Really?
That supposedly means you're comfortable.
Sure.
A lot of poker players sit like
Spectacular is
that.
how you describe how you feel right now?
If what?
You would describe how you feel right now as spectacular?
This guy asks some weird questions.
I don't believe you.
He's nothing if
Get
not
back on the
entertaining.
Chinese poker. Win it back.
So the bet from McAllister is 48k.
There's nothing you can do there. Brutal. Brutal.
Yeah.
Raba calls. What about the guy who started this with a pre-flop raise? Monsieur Tedeschi.
How are you, Theo?
What?
How are you?
I'm okay. Yeah.
That's a call as well. We're still three-way as we go to the turn.
It's really interesting. What would he raise pre-flop with? Not continue, but still call. And I think a lot of times it's going to be hands like 10s and jacks. Hands that maybe he wants to take a free card with. I mean, if it's jacks, he's really happy right now.
Yeah, Jack of Hearts on the turn.
I guess he could do it with some absolute monsters too. Slow play them, but I don't know. I don't see why he wouldn't just c-bet that flop.
Raba checks, and I think that was a check from Tedeschi. Yep.
How much do you have in greens? That's 200 in greens? 225?
He's gone from the one arm on one shoulder to two arms on two shoulders. The old water slide pose. Probably learned out there in the water park.
Philip McAllister bets again, 136,000.
So Tedeschi doesn't even have a pot-sized bet left behind.
Yeah, just realized he's the effective stack here, 388,000. Raba is the other big stack at the table.
Yeah, this could be a potentially huge pot.
Especially as it looks like he's calling. Smallest chips in play are the yellow
You got any paper in
1000s.
your pocket?
Blues are 5,000, greens are
Paper, right?
25,000.
No.
Receipt or something?
Unless Tedeschi's really strong, I would be shocked to see him
Oh,
overcall
it's the
here.
last one. I'll go give you the last one now.
If he's got a big draw,
Oh,
he
yeah.
might just
You want
shove.
Sure.
But you can't broadcast it, right?
Okay.
He's counted out the call.
He's raised all in.
Well, I think the worst he's gonna have here is a monster draw. I still kind of like him for Jackson. I guess queens is a possibility too. That would explain why he wouldn't want to c-bet, because he knows he can't get action on a board like that if 3 of the 4 queens are out. What just happened?
McAllister just called. He flats the all in.
It's pretty rare we would see 2 calls here.
But look at the price he's getting.
Okay, well,
Does call, so let's be clear. We have one player all in. We have a pot of 1.4 million. We're going to the river with potential action on the side between the
was
two
the
big
three-
stacks at this table.
Before we move on here, I want to make sure we all know what these players have, because we do eventually find out what specifically Tedeschi and McAllister have. Tedeschi has top set, a set of queens, and McAllister just turned a royal flush draw with king 10 of hearts.
Yeah.
So these are a couple monster hands with these two guys.
So it's a little less surprising this hand blowed up so good and so big.
Right. The hand that we never find out is Raba's hand, and he could have a lot of different things, and we broke it down on the podcast, and we're going to break it down here as well, the different types of hands he could have and why they make sense.
Right.
So this pot has obviously gotten crazy, and Joe is right. It is very rare to see an overcall by Raba in a spot like this. It means that he must have something with some pretty serious equity.
Yeah, if we were going to think about what kind of hands could Raba really call all 3 times he calls, basically, on the flop and then twice on the turn, but especially this big all-in on the turn, this overcall. There aren't that many hands really he can have. King 10 of clubs certainly makes all the sense in the world, and it's a hand we'd expect him to call.
Right,
with
it
here.
makes all of the sense, yes.
9, 8 of hearts, 7, 8 of hearts, things like that, 6, 8 of hearts. A pair and a heart draw makes sense.
He would have called on the flop with that hand against McAllister, who is an active player, and then he would have turned the flush draw and kind of been obligated to call again.
I guess he could have Jack X of clubs also, which is the similar thing as a 9, 8 of hearts kind of a thing.
Yeah, that's possible also.
I don't know. Can he ever have 2 pair here and he's going to call? Like, what? Jack?
Queen
8,
Jack?
Queen Jack or Jack 8 suited or something?
I guess
Maybe
it's
that?
possible, but it seems more likely that he would
Raise?
move in.
Yeah.
Although he may not. He may just call with those hands. That is possible.
I mean, McAllister doesn't have a set. McAllister would have re-raised with the set once Tedeschi moves in.
Yeah,
right?
he would have. So
So we
I
can
guess
move
that's a
in
good
pretty
point.
comfortably here.
Yeah, that's a good point. At the same time, Raba really doesn't have like a set of 8s here, because
No.
he would be moving in over the top of McAllister here if he had a set of 8s, just because there's so many draws he needs to protect. Also, he needs to charge McAllister for those draws. And McAllister might not have king 10 of hearts or something. We know he does have king 10 of hearts.
Yeah.
But if McAllister has queen jack, we want max value from that as well.
Yeah, for sure. It's just, you just have to move in with 2 pair or better here, I think, or raise with 2 pair or better, because the board has gotten so crazy wet with this Jack of Hearts turn card, and we're out of position, which means so often the river is going to go check, check. McAllister's going to be afraid of us calling this huge bet, and he's just going to check it back unless he makes some super nutty hand. So I think we just have to raise with 2 pair or better. So 8s for sure we're going to raise with. 9, 10, which has been speculated also, we would just have to raise this turn. You just have
Right.
to raise with the nuts here when it's this wet.
So really we think that Raba is supposed to only have one of 2 types of hands, and that's king 10 of clubs or 8x of hearts, sometimes maybe 4x of hearts, which is possible as well.
Yeah, yeah. And I guess, again, like Jack X of clubs is possible. But
Right.
I guess but
So let's talk a little bit about how the other guys are playing it so far.
Okay.
Because Tedeschi has played his queens in a very unconventional way when he checks the flop and doesn't really put in any action until the turn.
I mean, he gets everything he wants, right? He gets to potentially triple up with top set when he flops this way, but he does sort of set himself up. He's going to have to win at showdown now against 2 players, which is not what I think.
High risk, high reward.
Yeah.
Sometimes the risk part happens, and it might happen in this hand.
I don't hate this no matter how it's going to end up working out for him because it worked out so crazy well. But I will say, when he checks the flop and then overcalls on the flop and then checks the turn and moves in, he kind of always has a set of queens, right?
Right, but there is a ton of money in the pot already, so it's not so bad to just win the pot, although he's usually not just going to win the pot, which is great because sometimes you get action from hands that you're going to beat.
Yeah, but the other thing is he's taking a bit of a chance on the turn that McAllister is going to bet again when he checks after they've had Raba calling and Tedeschi called on the flop. You really need McAllister to bet again, otherwise it's sort of a disaster. Because a lot of bad cards can come. So many bad cards.
Right, and you also miss out on a ton of value.
Yeah.
So let's talk about McAllister's bet, because that's a marginal spot where McAllister could choose to bet or he could choose to check. And we kind of came to the conclusion in the podcast that both are fine.
Yeah.
Betting obviously builds a pot. He's never folding to any raise. It's impossible to fold to any raise when he just turned a royal flush draw.
I mean, any raise Tedeschi can make. He clearly isn't going to fold, and he's got to have a plan not to. I guess if Raba moves in after, McAllister just bets on the turn, Raba moves in for $1 million more, he's going to probably find a fold.
Right.
But that's all we have.
That's all we got, because after the action that actually occurred, if Raba were to move in, McAllister would then have to call based on how much is in the pot.
I don't know if he has to. It's very close. He's probably getting about the right odds. He might decide to fold because of tournament life and all that kind of stuff. Because he still has a lot of chips left. He probably would find a fold, but it's so rare for Raba to call on the turn and then ship after Tedeschi is shipped.
Yeah.
It's not something I don't think you have to worry about too much. I think it's fine to call with the intention of, I guess I'll fold if this guy moves in, but he's kind of never moving.
Okay, so here's the problem in my mind with McAllister betting the turn, the initial bet.
Yeah.
I think in order for it to be a plus EV play, he has to have fold equity here.
Right.
And, of course, he's not always going to have fold equity. He has to have some times when he has fold equity. Like you just said, Jonathan, the way Tedeschi has played this hand makes it look super strong even before Tedeschi moves in.
I agree. I think he's hoping Tedeschi has something like 2 10s and is going to fold if to this continued aggression. And even if Raba calls and Tedeschi folds, that's great. Raba has a draw or just has an okay hand, and he can maybe put a lot of pressure on Raba on the river because him and Raba both have really big stacks.
Yeah, so I guess it comes down to fold equity for him. And now we're going to get to see a pretty crazy river.
River card is the Ace of Hearts.
So the flush draw gets there, the backdoor flush draw, the backdoor straight draw. Do these two just check it down? No, they don't. He bets 300. It's a pretty small bet, but I don't see why you would bet here unless you're betting for value. There's no point in bluffing McAllister off the hand.
So 300,000 into the side pot. Tedeschi competing for the main pot of 1.4 million. And now McAllister moves all in. And he's got Raba covered.
How does everyone have a hand here?
I have no idea.
Don't be mad if I bluff you off a chop.
What is... What hand does he think that they could be chopping with?
I'll give you 2 minutes and then I'll call the clock. Sorry.
So that's 2 minutes plus 1 minute. It's 3 minutes to make a decision.
10 minutes, 17 minutes. I mean, at least. I looked up when it said 46. Oh, I know.
Baffling the way this hand is played out. That's a call.
No, it's a fold.
Yes.
And he likes what he sees.
No,
King 10 clubs.
King 10 of hearts for a royal flush.
It is a royal, and look at that, Tedeschi did have a set of queens. What a terrible, disgusting run out for what is going to be the best hand almost always.
That's what I...
Runner, perfect royal flush.
So obviously we know what Tedeschi and McAllister have. The main thing we're going to talk about here are all the possible things that Raba could have, and if they make sense or not to play the way that he did.
Yeah, the other thing we're going to talk about is how McAllister, he's probably not getting called anyway, but screws up any chances of getting called.
Yeah. So let's
giving some stuff
let's start
away.
with Raba though, because Tedeschi, there's not much to say.
Okay.
He was all in on the turn. He got a lot of chips in with top set. That's a pretty good idea.
It's fine.
Yeah. Okay, so we're going to put this in a couple tiers, and the tiers go from he's playing it well or fine down to he's playing it terrible / he's never played poker before in his life. Yeah. All right, so hands that really make sense for Tedeschi to do this with, that are playing it well and then making a good but correct and like should be easy but very hard live fold are the heart combos.
Yeah, like the 9-8 of hearts, which is, wow. I mean, that's a tough play. I actually think he played it great if he has the 9-8 of hearts.
Right, and the 9-8 of hearts is, to be clear, the very top of his range because we know all of the other hearts above that are accounted for by McAllister and the board.
Yeah.
So if he has the 9-8 of hearts, it's a good fold, but it's a very clear fold.
I think it's a clear fold too, which sort of sucks when you just have to throw away such an incredible hand. But McAllister just isn't bluffing here.
No, it's not possible for McAllister to be bluffing. Some of you might think, well, maybe McAllister is leveling and he knows that he's representing only the nuts when he moves in here because it's a dry side pot and Raba can't call. But all that being said, McAllister is never going to risk essentially his tournament on the hopes that that works, especially if he didn't have any sort of blockers.
Right. And here's the thing, like Raba can have the nuts himself. He can have king 8 of hearts. Like
Yeah.
it's not impossible.
So McAllister would just really never do that.
No, it's crazy when he's got, they both have so many chips. This is the thing. McAllister and him have like a million chips behind. So to just throw it all away, McAllister's not going to do it into a dry pot. And I guess there's now a 300K side pot, but he's not trying to win 17 blinds or 16 blinds or whatever. It's just not happening.
All right, so it makes sense for Raba to try to get some value out of a 7-8 of hearts type of hand.
Right.
Because McAllister's probably going to check back a ton of his range that he might call 300K. So that makes sense with 7-8 of hearts.
Right, because like king 10 got there, for example.
All right, the next level is like king 10 of clubs, which now McAllister has the nut straight, obviously. Or not McAllister, excuse me. Raba has the nut straight. And that also makes sense to bet, although it's not as ideal, obviously.
Yeah, but it's okay to bet here because we figure it's going to go check so often, and we can get value out of maybe worse hands sometimes, not likely, honestly.
I mean,
but
McAllister's
sometimes.
supposed to be folding a set here.
I agree, and it's not an easy call, honestly, with king 10, but he's probably going to call with king 10, which is problematic if we're only getting called by the same hand.
If we're Raba with king 10 of clubs, we're hoping McAllister has 9-10 and finds a call.
But McAllister never has 9-10 because he would have moved in.
Yeah,
he would have raised the turn.
That's the problem. So maybe king 10, it's just not as good as the hearts.
The only thing it does is it sets you up to not call a bigger bet on the river yourself, right? If you check, you may have to call 7. He may move in, and then you may have to call with king 10, right?
I don't know if you have to call with king 10 if he moves in into a dry side pot.
Maybe you bet 600,000.
Yeah, I mean, that is definitely a less clear spot than when Raba bets and then McAllister moves in.
Right, then it's just so strong.
So in a way, it's a very effective blocker bet with the top of your range, which kind of sucks to be doing. But so king 10 of clubs is also okay.
It's reasonable.
All right, the next tier down is going to be 9-10 of clubs, which is a hand that Raba could have reasonably gotten here this way with, although he usually moves in on the turn. You would think.
You would think. If he doesn't, I mean, not moving on the turn seems crazy, and then betting out when this ace of hearts comes also seems crazy because it makes a bunch of stuff.
9-10 of clubs is this is a bad play with
no,
9-10
we
of clubs.
like checking and maybe calling depending on the size of the bet.
Right, because a lot of McAllister's range includes hands like king 10, so that little pip does matter for sure. Yeah. Okay, so that's the kind of bad range. Now we're going to get into the terrible range.
Okay, let's do it.
If somehow, and this has been speculated and is the only reason we're really bringing this hand up, if somehow Raba has a set of 8s here, somehow he didn't move in on the turn.
Horrible.
I have no idea why he wouldn't do it.
You'd have to move in on the turn.
Leading out on the river here with a set of 8s is just a disaster.
Completely.
You cannot do it.
Yes. No, I mean, it's just, I don't like my chips, so I'm going to get rid of them. We were talking about this on our podcast. Is McAllister going to call with a set of 4s? I don't think so.
I don't think he's supposed to, at least.
I think he's probably going to fold most of the time with a set of 4s because look at that card on the river. Look at all Raba had to have something on the turn to call all that stuff, and now he's suddenly betting. No, hopefully, it seems like the most likely scenario is that Raba river to flush and got very unlucky.
Right.
And we hope that's what it is. And we think that's probably what happened.
And it usually has an 8 in it, whatever flush he has.
Yeah, a lot of the time he's got an 8. I guess he could have 5-4 hearts sometimes too.
I gotta add one more tier. It's the very lowest of the tiers.
Okay.
It's this is the first tournament that Raba's ever played, and he's got 2 pair.
Yeah,
that would just be an atrocious thing to do.
There's no
Yeah,
ace jack.
can't do it.
Okay, now let's look at one other thing too. So McAllister moves in and very quickly says this.
Don't be mad if I bluff you off a chop.
That's a real problem because it's just so crazy strong. Like, he just seems so confident when he says something like that.
Also, it sounds like he's trying to get called by King 10 and also, A, get called by King 10, but B, saying, if you have hearts, you should definitely call. That's what the message is, right? He's trying to weaken his range enough to say, if you happen to have a flush here, kid, you have to call. And if you have King 10, you have to consider it.
Also, you guys have eyes and ears. You saw how he said it. It's just so crazy comfortable.
But then also, there's this.
I'll give you 2 minutes and then I'll call the clock. Sorry.
So that's 2 minutes plus.
Yeah, it just keeps going, huh?
I mean, look at his eyes. Look how calm and serene he is. And just how, sorry, I have to call the clock. Sorry.
In order to see how strong this really looks, and McAllister is a 22-year-old kid who's an online player mostly, so he hasn't been in these spots live that much. It's hard to really know what to say or do. Keeping your mouth shut is probably the best idea.
For sure. If you're going to be like this, keep your mouth shut.
But imagine for some reason you're McAllister and you have 9-10 and you're making some crazy meta level play where you're trying to get Raba off of King 10 and you know he has King 10 or whatever. Let's for some reason put him in that scenario and you want him to fold. Would you ever say that in your life?
I just don't believe it.
No, it's not possible.
I just can't believe you'd ever say that. And the truth is this. He's just never moving in. I mean, I think you can probably fold absent all these tells anyway, but these tells make it a lot easier to make one of the really hard folds, like the 9 high flush fold, which is like, oh my God, how can this be? But then you look at the guy and he just has it.
Yeah.
Somehow he has it. You know?
Yeah. So if Raba folded the 9 high flush or the 8 high flush, then it's a good fold.
It's a fantastic hand. It's like a legendary hand, honestly.
Yeah. If he had a set of 8s, it's garbage. It's terrible.
Yeah, he just gave away 300K.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense. But my prediction, we don't know what he's got, but eventually we will know. I'm gonna say he had 7-8 of hearts.
Okay, congratulations, you're wrong.
Okay, what do you say?
It's definitely 9-8 of hearts and or 8-6 of hearts.
Oh,
I'm taking
of course.
2. I get to take 2 cards.
Okay, that's fine. You got a deal, buddy.
Stick around because after this, we're going to look at viewer comments from last week's video.
If you guys want to see another PCA hand where there's a river raise and a really tough spot, check out He Did What by clicking here.
Yeah, that's one of my all-time favorite hands, actually. True classic. Also, check out our podcast and make sure you subscribe.
Last week, we had a hand between 3 legendary players, Doyle, MF, and Brunson.
MF'in'.
Phil Hellmuth and Daniel Negreanu, and Negreanu wins the pot by basically blowing Hellmuth off of a bluff, but Hellmuth played it in such a weird, bad way. And he was never really going to win if he played it that way.
Yeah, let's hear what you guys had to say. So on Reddit, MHJoby or Hobie says, I'm no expert, so I'm sure I'm wrong, but, I mean, come on.
Yeah, but.
Why would you say that and then say but? Come on. I feel like Phil's don't reach for those gray chips shtick might have played a much bigger part of Daniel's line of thought. Definitely seemed like Daniel was considering a call on such a small bet, but ended up bluffing very quickly after that speech.
What we came to the conclusion of on the podcast at least, was that Phil is actually pretty balanced with his verbal stuff, which may be surprising because he's pretty unbalanced with bet sizing and things like that. But we've seen in the past Phil be balanced at the World Series of Poker even this year.
Yeah.
When he's saying, what was he saying?
He was saying, I'll take this one, you take the next one.
Right, yeah, and he was actually balanced in that. We didn't expect him to be. So we don't think that's a huge factor. And beyond that, Daniel just knows that the best play is to raise here, the way that Phil played the hand, and that's really got to be the main factor.
Daniel's never calling with bottom pair when it looks like Phil pretty much always has a 7 or a queen, which is top pair or second pair. Daniel's always raising or folding here. He's not going to call even 6,000, even though he's getting great odds, because the flush came in too. Daniel's definitely raising because he knows he can rep it when Phil bets so small. All right, let's hear another one. This is on YouTube. This is Michael SWG, and he says, isn't analyzing single hands slightly contrived? I mean, yes, you can analyze it to a certain depth, but can you really objectively say what is the right or wrong play when there are many factors going through a player's mind in a hand that were conceived from hands or even games before the present?
Okay, so he's questioning our entire platform here.
I mean, basically saying, you guys, you're doing it wrong.
Okay.
Fair enough.
So we cannot objectively say that a play is right or wrong with pure categorical logic and be 100% sure of ourselves, but we can do our best, and that's what we do. And of course, sometimes there's something that doesn't seem that standard or good in gameplay, but ends up working out in kind of a positive way because of outside factors. And usually we try to extrapolate what those factors may be.
I mean, you're basically saying we have to know the entire history of all players, both, you know, and their reputations and their dynamic with every other player to be able to analyze anything. You're not saying that, but you're sort of implying that anyway, to do it perfectly. I guess that's true, but we're not going to do that much work. It's not happening.
I do appreciate where this thought comes from.
Yeah.
But we're still going to make the breakdown.
Yeah, and hopefully you still will enjoy it.
Yeah.
But, we'll do our best based on one hand at a time, and we do know these players' reps anyway, and we have a sense of some of their dynamics, and we think it's usually enough. And, you know, sometimes, like Daniel Negreanu, for example, actually tweeted that he liked our analysis of one of his hands so much and didn't want to tell the rest of the world about it. He thought it was so good. So at least we're right some of the time.
Right. So now that we've all complimented ourselves pretty
I mean,
well.
I couldn't help it.
All right, we'll see you guys next week.
Later.